Paul Lloyd, welcome to the Marketing for Business podcast.
Thank you very much.
Mate, I'm excited to have you on. A few people have told me you've got to interview you. Apparently you're a world of knowledge, especially Greg Beeman. He's got a few questions he's put in here for you as well.
Well, Beeman.
But firstly, I noticed you were in Panami there. What's the significance of that? Because that looks pretty cool.
You know, I was the typical sort of person of my age that grew up in a time when you knew very little about the culture of the country. You know, you probably learned more about British heritage and so forth. But about 5 years ago, I was lucky enough, we started working on a project called Kiwa Aquatic Centre in Gisborne, and there was a gentleman there, Sir Derek Liddell, who was effectively the co-designer. So he was there to give local iwi and hapu input, Māori design, you know, to AO into the project and help us understand the why around this project, where it sat and so forth. And the first meeting I had with him, he'd just come from a funeral for two young Māori kids in their teens, and it's just something that, because of his position in Māoridom, he actually wrote the second All Black haka.
Oh, wow.
That he was asked to do that, and he turned up and he was completely drained. You know, you could see that the load of what he'd just done was really bearing on him. And he sat down and he said, "I'd just like to say a karakia." And now I've seen karakias being done, but I've never really understood the potential impact. And he did this karakia, and he came out of it a different person.
Wow.
It was like he'd put this burden he was carrying into a sacred and a precious place in his head, but he freed his mind to be present.
Wow.
And I looked at that and I just thought, boy, I've missed something. All my life. I've missed something about how other people, other cultures, Māori, you know, look at the world. And through that whole process, and later on in that meeting, he said to us, "This is a big aquatic scene, you know, it's got 50-metre pool, fantastic." And he said, "I want you all to think about, we're with the design team, that this isn't a place where people come to swim, it's a place where people come to learn.
Wow.
And I want you to change your thinking." No,
that's cool.
That is such a small thing. But when you really think about the design of the building, we're all sitting there going, holy moly. And then I had this idea. I said, these pools have a large mechanical room, a plant room, with all the filters and pumps and chlorine and everything else. I said, why don't we put a glass wall up so the people of the pool can see this one? And he goes, "Paul, that's the manawa. That's the heart."
Yeah.
So that little thing and that little connection with Sir Derek really opened up my eyes to so much that I'd missed, and I ended up. I've written a karakia with a good friend of ours. It started a journey in our business, Apollo, with an amazing guy, Honihiki Rankin, who is the seventh descendant of Honihiki, who had a bit of a chop at the flagpole. And he's helped us on a cultural journey at Apollo. But it's really just having this view of the world and knowing there's other ways to look at it. And, you know, when people say to me when I'm away, or what does this mean, I hold it and I say, this is home.
Beautiful.
You know, and that's just me. And I've had friends say to me, when you talk about your kids, you always hold it.
Yeah.
And I don't do that intentionally, but it's just become who I am. I love it. We've given it to, you know, my wife's American, her two parents wear it every day in the US. There's just this really nice connection between people and place when you really, I guess, it's not just understand it, but when you accept and it becomes something important to you. So my daughter recently got married, her and her husband. We presented one. My nephew, blessed them. He's part Māori. He blessed them in Akaroa Harbour.
Oh, beautiful.
And then they got gifted to them by my the mum of them, my ex-wife. And so there's just a lot of very special. And I was actually thinking after here, since it's next door, I'm going to have another look through there. And,
True.
Because you can't buy them yourself.
Yes.
It's got to be gifted.
Yeah.
You never give them away.
Yeah.
The only time it should be passed on is if you pass.
Yep.
So there's a few things like that that are important to know. So yeah, it is very special. It's just helped me on, I guess, a new journey for me.
What a great way to think, though, when you're coming in with a lens of engineer trying to get things built in a structure so people can come in there, and what you think he's going to swim, and then someone comes in and say, hey, this is a place to learn. What a different lens to put on things, right?
Absolutely. You know, in that place, there's other things in the entrance. There's this beautiful taniwhao that hangs above you. And I've always thought that was a dragon, it was bad. And he goes, no, it's a protector.
Yeah.
And I might not get this 100% right, so, you know, I am a Pakeha, so. But it is, it was just really nice. And the building just tells an amazing story. It won a really special award at one of the property awards around the cultural connection and the integration into the building, because every part of it tells a story. The shapes, the building has a whole lot of triangles in it, and that relates to the weave of the sails of the early Walker that came in
That's so
around
good.
Young's North Head. And you talked to the manager there, and he said the big reason I'm here is because of what this means to the community.
Nice.
So yeah, very special.
It's amazing that you're involved with that, and obviously the journey that keeps evolving for you. And I'm really interested to talk more about Apollo and those side of things. But you also said there was three significant things that were part of this as well. So you mind like maybe because
Yep.
I think it's important for context where people because a lot of what you told me a lot of people deal with as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I've sort of reflected on my life, and there was definitely three major events for me. The one I've just talked about was the third one.
mm,
The first one, I came from a family where it was just mum. To be honest, dad wasn't the nicest person. He passed away when I was 15, but mum and dad were separated. So mum
Yep.
was the strength of all three
Yeah.
of our kids. But she struggled. Like for 9 years, she never bought new clothes.
Yep.
She went back, got UE, went into teachers college, all off her own bat,
Wow.
and definitely the hard work aspect came
Yep.
from here.
Yeah.
And 12 years old, I made a soccer rep team. We went along. I can still picture it in Glenfield Soccer Club, and the manager gets up and goes, "Hey, look, we've done really well. We've managed to get the tracksuits down to $20." And Mum looked at me, still chokes me up, started crying,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
said, "Paul, I can't afford it."
Yeah.
But what I learned was how fast kids forgive themselves more than the parents do.
Yep.
Because
Totally.
that burdened her for a long time.
Yes. Yes.
And someone, I can't remember what happened, someone ended up paying for it. But, it was just a lesson around, money, about pressure. And there's so much today when I see, like I was lucky enough, my kids went to a private school. I didn't, but it was just the nature of what happened. And some of the trips they do there, it's all right if you've got
Yeah.
if you're earning a couple of $1 million a
Yeah.
year, but a lot of parents mortgage their houses to put their
Yep.
kids into those
Yep.
schools, and then they go, "Well, we're doing a rugby trip to Singapore and Hong Kong."
Yeah.
And to me, that's just wrong because again, it's not the kids will move on and
Yeah.
see their mates and everything else, but the parents sitting there going, "I failed because all
Yeah.
my mates go." So that
Yeah.
was one of them. The second lesson. No, I'm definitely an engineering brain. Well, I was. I was born drawing square boxes that were white. And it's interesting how Apollo, our business, builds cold stores, which are square and white.
White. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, but after doing my engineering degree, I went and did a marketing diploma, which is sort of half an MBA, but focuses really on that marketing side because I really needed to open up my brain because it's very linear. And so I went to university and I was in a lecture and I hadn't done very well on this marketing assignment. And I'm always the one that puts the hand up and asks the questions.
Yep.
And I said, "Excuse me, sir." And I think everyone wanted to know the same question. "Excuse me, I didn't do very well on the assignment. What was the right answer?" And he looked at me and he knew my background. We got on really well. And he goes, "Paul, you're not going to like this. There is no right answer." So for someone who's got a linear brain that everything connects the dots, that was like what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always a right answer, and that was a big thing for me. And I don't know whether it was just my brain had a just complete reorganization, but from that moment onwards, a lot of my career became more around, I'd say some leadership, but some lateral thinking. I was able to write differently. I could actually think rather than just going, A to B to C. It's what's the story I'm telling through here. So that was the second one, and then included the being exposed to Tao and so forth was number 3.
I always find it incredible where little moments of your life shape your life, right?
Oh,
And
100%.
when you really reflect, similar to myself, my mum and dad split up when I was probably 12. I made a rep team, and we needed long pants, and mum was like she was doing everything for us, and dad wouldn't pay for them. And mum was like, well, like everyone, what am I going to wear shorts? Like everyone else is wearing, and it was an interesting moment. I always remember my nana paid for them. And it really taught me, I started working from then on. Like I made my own money, and it was one of those things where, you're right, you forget about it, forgive about it, but your mum would have held on to that for a long time. And I know she was, kind of angry. What did you learn about money over those years growing up? Obviously, I learned that there was lack of money, and I had to do a lot of work, probably into my early 30s to really get through some money blocks that I had. And I did actually do a lot of work, and now I have a different relationship with money. But did it affect you at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting. You just said about starting to work. I forgot. That was pretty much when I started cleaning. When I started secondary school, I started cleaning an intermediate school after school. So I'd ride to work. I'd go there. Again, I tried to engineer the cleaning so I could do it as efficiently as possible and not take the hour and quarter you were supposed to. But but then the guy running it didn't like the fact that I could do it quicker than an hour and a quarter because I've always been very efficient with time.
Making him
so I've
look
always
bad.
worked. I probably I found a way very early on. We used to live near a bar called the Poenamo, which had a garden bar back then, really busy. And on a Sunday morning, really early, I used to go down and collect all the Coke bottles that were out there. You used to be able to get money back.
Yeah.
And then I'd walk it across the road to the petrol station and get the money back.
Perfect.
So I think that was and that's how I bought my first skateboard. And that was all good until the boys in blue turned up and said, where are you getting all this from? And I went, my dad and parents, they drink a lot of soft drink. But I didn't think I was doing too bad, but it was just one of those funny stories where, because we had to. Mum had nothing, but Mum gave everything to us. We'd go while she was cleaning after work and she went back to school, got UE, became a teacher. And really interesting story, which, it's a bit personal, but, my dad died and my dad had a Rolls Royce, was an entrepreneur, but he had nothing. He didn't pay the tax man. So he passed away, and my dad, we all got $1,500, the three kids. And then my mum passed away a couple of years ago, and we got $150K from her hard work over 80-something years.
Yes.
And it was just such a poignant moment knowing where the pain had been and who had done the work and how hard she'd worked. And, the two siblings and I were just so proud of her in terms of she showed how hard work can make a big difference than almost trying to cheat the system.
Totally.
So
my mum, same story. Left. She passed away last year, but she's left a legacy. Like mortgage free. Yeah. Where other people all around her are not, right. And I was really proud of the fact that she worked 3 or 4 jobs sometimes. Probably like your mum, but just knew the value of being, I guess, frugal to some degree, but her relationship with money was that you worked hard. She saw that from her family, who growing up on farms and stuff. But she knew how to save a dollar, and she ended up mortgage free, and she had a good life as well, which I'm proud of as well. So
look, Mum, her sister, she had a 1-year-old, and Dad, and my nana came here on the boat from the UK 6 weeks. If that doesn't toughen you up, I don't know what does on a boat. There's nothing like the boats they are today.
No.
She laid a concrete path. I remember all the things, and when she was on sick and pretty much on her deathbed a few years ago, some of the stuff that we found out through papers and documents about how tough it had been for her in terms of how she was treated by Dad, even just reinforced how well she protected us from things and how she shaped the three of us. But it was interesting when I said the story about my dad maybe didn't pay all his tax. My sister, his eldest daughter, became one of the highest people on the IRD.
Oh wow! Oh, there you go. She learned from his.
It's just classic. So we do laugh about that. But hey, look, good. I know, he is my dad and stuff. Yeah. But Mum is certainly the one that's given us all the things.
Mate, I feel that. And look, mate, that makes this the thing like you're talking about in your Pananu so much more like special. So I can see why you grab it when you're in moments, right? That's very, very cool. Hey, so let's switch gears, because I read an article about you, and this may tie into your third point around stories. You want to create 100 or 1,000 stories. What's that about inside Polo? Is that about your culture, your performance? Tell me a bit more about that, because I think that's the audience here are business owners.
Yep.
And I think in a world that we live in now, the more authentic and better you can be at telling your story, the better you're going to show up in this world.
Look, I've always had a strong belief that the businesses with the most stories are often the most successful. And that's because they've been there, they've done it, they've done good, they've done bad, they've done ugly, they've done all sorts of things. And it's sort of changed a little bit now, but a few years, it's probably 10 years ago now, we were sitting down and we used to take all our team, walk the Able Tasman over 3 days. We're too big now. And the stories that came out of there were just hilarious. Yeah. So we also started in about year 4 at our Christmas awards, what we call the Cabbage Awards. So there's a whole lot of categories. Like, I can't believe you said that, vehicle, IT, and other ones, right?
Yeah.
And this stories are nuts. Like if you get your team to actually record when someone does something stupid,
true.
and there's no rebuttal.
Yeah.
And if you try and deny it, it gets worse. And I present it.
Yep.
And you can't say anything. So, it can get a little bit, exaggerated.
Yeah.
But again, it's such a wonderful thing for the business because you have to laugh at each other as well as yourself.
Yeah.
And so those are the stories that started to create. And we're actually this year's going to be the first year we actually start doing some highlight reels of previous cabbage nominations.
Yeah,
We had the HR manager go around a roundabout. She thought she got cut off. She gave the finger next to the bird and looked down at a set of Apollo on it. We had a guy at work
that is brilliant.
Who's half Derek. He's our accountant. He's the most hilarious accountant. He's got the personalities of every other accountant.
Yeah.
And he used to walk around the office playing a trumpet just with his hands, and then he'd be all excited because he got a letter, but then he realised he'd posted the letter to himself. I dinged my brand new car. My business partner Craig parked his car in the paddock on his farm and couldn't work out why there was all these marks on it, and he washed it and the cows had licked it and they basically crazed the whole side of his nice car.
Let's go.
So there's a whole lot of stuff, and you can hide that stuff, but you may be able to bring it out. And we did a project in Niger in Africa, which we could do 100 stories on. So there's just so many events that happen in business, and it was just trying to grab them, and have them
be real intentional about it, right? Like.
Yeah, and finding a way. So we have an annual get-together before our Christmas party now where Craig and I get up and just talk, and people can ask us questions, and that's the best way because when we're pinging off each other, we've had a couple of wines.
Yep.
A lot of stuff starts coming back about what we did and the good things we did, the stupid things we did, all that stuff. And so stories, I just think are really important to. And it's interesting the word you mentioned, the word culture. It's probably one of my most hated words.
Yep.
For me, it's who we are.
Yep.
And because the thing with culture is people tend to try and decide what that is and then tell people.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, someone looking in should be able to tell you. It's not for you to decide. You shouldn't be able to say what your culture is. Someone else should say, these guys have a good time. Yeah. That's part of the culture. Yeah, they're honest and trustworthy because I've worked them. That's their culture. And that defines it. And it's a bit like values. Values should be what someone else sees you doing rather than we're all going to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? And I think there's too much. There's I think the other words I don't like is solution, legacy, innovative. Because what is that? Yeah, it's just a word that can mean 100 things to 100 people. Totally. Find something like we've actually got one of our values. We were going to take it down, but we didn't. It says we don't work for wankers. Nice. Now we've had that on our wall when we're a little bit more sort of rough around the edges. We're a bit bigger now. We were thinking, is it really right in a business of our size? And a client was talking to Craig, my business partner, and he said, don't ever take that down. No. He said, is it? And it's fantastic. Now, you've got the safety ones and other things, but, and we did work for one of those once. And that's where that value came from.
I love it. Look, I look at core values and like I just don't understand why you'd have honesty, integrity and stuff like that. Yep. Like one of ours is results, not reasons. And we work with business owners and we understand that they want the results, but they don't want the reasons why it didn't go well, and they actually don't want the reasons why it went well half the time, right?
Absolutely.
They just want the outcome, and they want to know they're in safe hands with that. And I definitely I love core values, but I don't love the ones where they are a given. Like we actually just retired our core value into the Hall of Fame: celebrate your victories, because that's a given now. Like if you work here, you have to celebrate your victories.
Yep. So it's built in.
It's built in. It's one of those things that you can't get away from.
Yeah, we've got laugh at each other as well as yourself. Glass half full, safety above all out. So they're quite specific. The glass half full one, I'll challenge people on that.
Yep.
When they come to me, I'll go, "Is your glass half full or half empty?" Because if it's half empty, come back and talk to me in a minute. Because I don't want to hear the problems. I want to tell you how you can help. Yeah. Getting this thing resolved. Own it, solve it's another one. They come, Paul, what should I do? I say, no, you go away and you tell me what you do. And I'm happy to guide and mentor you, but, particularly in where I've tried to get Craig in my roles now, it's not to be giving answers, it's been giving guidance and help and mentoring.
How did you evolve that, though? Because you've gone from, like, you went from in the business, you were working and then you start employing people. And now you've got 80 plus people, and you've got a management team involved. How did that thinking evolve? Like, was it your own mindset, or were you getting external help? Where was the process there?
We've got a really good board, and just in terms of so about 5 years ago, we started putting structures in place around the early phases of an SLT and senior leadership team, and that was our first thing where we realised we had to sort of have different parts of the business. One's looking after pre-construction, one's construction, finance, general, corporate services, which is IT and stuff and so forth. So we needed leaders in those spaces. And part of the realisation we came to was Craig and I love construction.
Yep.
But we didn't really get fizzing about HR, IT, finance and stuff. Because it really wasn't in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But we love building stuff.
Yeah.
Building stuff is in the blood when you're in construction. Yeah, engineer chippy ways. Craig's a chippy.
Yep.
Can't write, but he's a chippy. Dyslexic as hell. But
he'll be measuring 3 times.
Best business partner I could ever choose. So
nice.
So we decided to do that, and that allowed a little bit more ownership. But Craig and I were still very green on how to manage that because, we were up until, we're a $200+ million business now. Yep. We were 30, 50, so everything we had our hands on, right?
Yep.
And it was a little bit about, so I was talking to you off here before about the how did we get on to doing some of the charitable work. But it was 2020, I think, we went to this business planning session, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was talking to the team, and I said, Apollo's going to outlast us. And that was like being hit by a bolt of lightning. Yeah. This is your baby.
You've built something that's now
and you're going, you're not going to be taking care of this. It's going to carry on past you. And so we talked about, Craig and I had a really nice conversation around, we really wanted to become intergenerational. So all the decisions we made had to be a long-term decision.
Yeah.
And about a year after that, we were talking with the board and so forth, or a couple of years, and we started talking about how we could be less involved in the operating of the business. Yep. And, we've talked about a CEO for a while, but we made that decision that we really needed to get a CEO in. Now that, when you first think about it, it's like, great, I'm going to have less stuff to do. But then you realise the implications of it, that you can no longer, you've really got to be able to let some of the things go.
Yeah.
And we went through a process and really lucky to get our CEO, Peter, who is, and, initially his role was definitely to look at everything that was in construction because we still had Craig and I in the business. Yep. And we're not going anywhere, right?
Yep.
And we're getting to a point now, he's been here 18 months, we need to define what do we want from Craig and Paul rather than we need less of Craig and Paul. Yeah. Right. So let's define that. Nice. Maybe one day it's big and one day it's not. One day it's not. But I don't, because there was talk, it was like, we need to work out how we're going to have less of Paul and Craig. Well, Paul and Craig aren't going anywhere because we love Apollo.
Love Apollo.
And I don't know if our wives want us at home 5 days a week. So look, that's just part of where we're at. So we started down that process. And there was a few revelations in that Peter's outstanding at doing that work, right? Didn't come from construction, which is sort of what we wanted, because otherwise you tend just to fall back into what you're comfortable in. So, it's now as part of the work is educating Peter on the things Craig and I look at in construction. So he starts to learn those little things, under the carpet and stuff, and what are the little signs you see. But it's also for Craig and I, I had another aberration. I was sitting in my office going, there's all these little things that are biting at me and I'm getting pissed off. And I realised that 95% is good enough.
Yep. Okay.
And that is such a and I've told that to another Craig.
How did
Duff.
that go for your engineering brain?
Well, it's just something you had to accept.
Yeah.
Because if I stopped worrying about the little 5% things, my life became a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really was a big thing. And I use that now with Craig. I go, Craig, is that the 95 or the 5?
Wow.
Because if it's something that someone's annoyed you or it's going to cost you $200, it's just not worth the argument, or it's not worth the, it's not that, it's not worth the emotional effort to deal with it. And so I really try and live by, if I'm trying to finalise a claim and it's a $50 million project and it's $400 and I go back and forward, I'm just going to go, you know what? It's in the 5%.
Yep.
If I could use this time positively to train people to go and see a client, the return's infinitely better.
Yeah, totally.
And that was it was a pretty big moment. And there's another good friend of ours, company we work with, they've just sold a portion of their business. And so he's there, now getting into the same sort of role that I'm in, Craig's in. And I told him that, and he goes, wow, that's probably going to be one of the biggest things I can think about
Yeah.
going forward, because we were always involved in the
Yeah.
detail.
What a great lens to look at things, eh? Like, is that the 95 or is it the 5?
Yep.
And if it's the 5, you know, that the envision thinking there is, as you said, if I could be spending this time doing something else that has, you know, like exponential return, like training your staff or mentoring one of your team versus looking at that going.
And Craig and I were bloody good
Yeah.
at what we did.
Yeah.
So we would always be targeting 100 when we were driving things, right?
Why do you think people get stuck looking at that though? Is it perfection? Is it, you know, wanting to be right? Like, what do you think?
Oh, look, I think it's unreasonable to expect A, non-owners, and B, Craig and I, who have spent so much time together and get each other, to see and get and not. Our team do care, but to care at that infinite level, it's not reasonable.
No,
you know,
true.
people aren't getting the returns that
No.
we get because we own the company.
Yeah.
So it's not reasonable to expect that, because as soon as you do that, you put a lot of heat on them. They then feel the heat and the stress, and it's not reasonable. It's there are big things you get involved with, but with those small things, you just got to let them go.
Yeah, nice. That's a real good takeaway. And Peter obviously coming into the business, and obviously he's helping you grow that leadership team, right? The senior
100%.
leadership team. And look, what do you look for in leaders? Like when you look at, or you know, when you're looking at someone like Peter, what are you looking for?
So the thing that stood out with Peter is his personality and his way with people, and he's worked hard on growing the leadership skills of the group in our business. And you know, he was saying to me the other day on the SLT, now's the time we're going to start getting into the detail, which is an area that I've wanted to see, because it's great to have a whole lot of leaders, but if your team don't have the high level skills to deliver, then it doesn't matter how good you are as a leader. So we're starting to work on that now. Giving a shit is always a thing for me. You know, someone who truly cares. Yeah, and it's not
matters, eh?
It's not lip service.
No.
It's, you can see it in them, A, when things go well, and B, when they don't.
Yeah.
And you know, that's you can learn skills, but you can't learn a personality. And you know, the history of Apollo was, when Craig and I were there at the start, we just employed good bastards, right? And that's a general neutral term, before I get accused of something, but it's general, from some of my generation, it's a general neutral term. So we'd have these people, he's a good bastard, we'll get him on. And we had a blast. We used to disappear at midday on a Friday. We go to the town, we got a cell phone, we get on the Terps and blah, blah, blah in the young days. And we had a blast. And then we got big enough, shit, we've got to have HR now. You know? So then we had to do job descriptions and all these other things, and follow processes. And I don't think we had anyone having a go at us in the early days. But we got to a point where, and this is a true story, we were looking to employ a general manager. We interviewed him 6 times.
Oh, wow.
Like, you know, you've got it wrong when you get to 6 times.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason it's taking 6 times.
Did you take him to the pub once?
We did on the last one. But that is, as soon as you get to that, you realise you've lost that key thing, which is about intuition and so forth. And so, you know, that's when we said, you know what, we've got to start bringing a little bit of what we used to do in this. Yeah. First 30 seconds of meeting someone, or a minute, you absolutely get a feel for what they are like as a person. That's the thing that you want to have around you in the office. And so we do focus a lot on that.
Very cool.
I mean, it's hard now, you know, Jesus, this you know, it's scary at the moment. We had 2 jobs interviewed recently. One had 500 applicants and one had 300.
Yeah.
Which is not something I ever like to see. A lot of them are internationals and stuff, but it's a pretty scary situation in the economy.
It's a lot to filter, right? Like,
yeah, but it's just more that that many people are looking.
Yeah,
you know, it's just
true. Yeah, true. I do notice that when we have applications out, you can kind of gauge the economy by how many people you're getting and what's going on there. Absolutely. When you look at Apollo, when you first started out, you said, you know, you were at high school and school drawing white boxes. How did Apollo evolve, and obviously taking it from 30, 50 million, which a lot of people will be listening going, man, that's an awesome business. But obviously then you're going to the 200. You niched down fairly early in the business when you were looking at, you know, what you were building.
Did we what, sorry?
Niche down, like you were looking at, you know, building cold storage and that type of
So I was working in a company that was called Arrow International, who unfortunately bust about 8 years ago. 2 owners in there, Ron and Bob. Ron was quite a mentor to me, sort of quite similar, and Bob was sort of quite similar to Craig. And so I worked in Arrow, left them for a while, did my marketing diploma, and then they contacted me and said, would you go and run a company in Christchurch called Long International, which made polystyrene panel?
Yep.
So, I said yes. And it became, and part of the reason to go there was to start using that product in buildings that we did design and build. So we owned it. So not just make a product, but use it on your own projects. So we started that. Did a couple of reasonably cool projects, but it became really clear to me that my skill was not on running manufacturing. It's a very different approach. You've got to be very detail focused on everything, and you've got to be looking at graphs and it didn't work for me. And the type of people and the culture, and I use the culture in that place, was just not who I was. So after about 3 years, I was done, and it was destroying me. Some of the stuff that happened there was just beyond belief. But I went to Craig one day and I said, look, I can't do this anymore. Would you like to go and we can go start our own company? Because we had a couple of projects on. So we went to the other owners and they said, yep. And so we were lucky enough that we ended up taking a half-finished project across into the new company. And there's an interesting story about that. I didn't get my marketing completely right, was because this company was called Long International, we thought we'd have a sister company called Long Projects.
Yeah.
Not the smartest name in the world, but after about so we all do stupid things occasionally.
That's gold.
But then we changed it to Apollo, and the thing that we did was we always wanted to be involved in the start. Too much construction is you get documents, you never really see the client, you price out what someone else builds, but you don't really have an input. That wasn't us. So our first project we ever did, we had 5 of us. We started Apollo with. The marketing guy went up to Blenheim, met one of the people up there. They were building a winery, the Rose family, Wairau River, and we got that job and design and build. So we managed the design and we built the whole thing. And probably the best story about that is that we had so the client phoned me. I don't know, we started in October, had to be finished by March, which was suicidally fast, but we did it. He called me about November and he said, Paul, can I talk to you about all the stuff inside? And I'm going, what goes inside a winery? Tanks and shit. I know we called them vats back then. We didn't even know what to call them. I got in my car, drove straight to Blenheim, got off the phone, got up there, spoke to Phil, and he said, look, this is our problem. He said, can you do it? And I've done a marketing diploma. Of course we can.
Yeah.
Drove back to Christchurch going, what have I done? Grabbed my business partner, Craig. He was actually on site running it. Refrigeration company, electrical company, and a controls company, and sat down with them and said, look, this is what I've been asked to do. And they said, piece of piss, it's just physics. Heating, cooling wine, moving it around. And I went, oh, okay. So we went up there, asked all those dumb questions. How much wine goes in? What temperature? How does it heat? Refrigeration guy goes, okay, well, this is how much energy I need to put in. The pipework goes this. We built that winery for less than what the money he's told us he had. And the first 6 months, they had 60 wineries visit it, because it was not like any other winery. That was the wine industry is always traditional. Why do you do that? Because we always have. So we started there, and that was where we sort of built our first tent up in Blenheim, and did a whole bunch of wineries. That industry has changed now. We're still in the industry, but it's now more production, large. That first winery was, the largest tank was 40,000 litres, which is 4,000 cases of wine. We're now putting in 500,000 litres tanks, which is 50,000 cases of wine in one wine tank. So it's a different place now, but that's how we started in loving the control side, or the design and build. So we have design managers at work. We don't have actual designers. And so that's how it evolved, that we wanted to show that our team could be smart in the outcomes.
What I love about what you said too, though, is like the guy has a problem, right? And I always look at things. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. And he was just wanting the solution, right? And he trusted someone. You're smart enough to go, yep, we can have a look at that, and bring other people around you that go, oh yeah, we can do that. That's a breeze.
And I can tell you that the way we do things, and, you get the old traditional model, and that's going to be cheaper because I'll get someone to design it and I'll put it to 3 people. It's not even close to being the lowest cost, because what you're all pricing is that design. And it's the questions that you get asked. Like you say, we do sports and aquatic facilities now. We do big cold stores. The biggest one was, Maersk and Hamilton's almost 2 hectares. It's got 1.3 megawatts of electricity on the roof.
Wow.
Every one of these buildings is about us being super smart and understanding the operating side of it.
Yep.
And not being disrespectful to designers anywhere.
No.
But ours, because we stay engaged and
Boots
we're
on the
there,
ground.
we're doing remedial, we're always back and forth and we learn which dock levelers work, which rapid rise doors work. We understand how a pool works, whether the floor cone is, because we're constantly there. So we still love our designers, right?
Yeah.
They're an important part of the team, but it's a three-spoked wheel. You've got designers, you've got the client, you've got the contractor. You take any one of those three out, it doesn't go as smoothly. So, we're very strong in that design build phase, because if you can take 10% out of the design, you might tender it and you get 2 or 3% difference in prices. Well, you're never going to get it. It's just not how it works. No. And we did a recent building that was built up in the North Island for a government area. It was then we got to build that building to go in for a bid in Christchurch. We took 55% of the structural steel out of that building by designing it differently, having different designers, having people who really care about making it small. We've just done our first Ministry of Education one, which is a gym up in the North Island. They had a price that was, I think it was 7 or 8 million. Ours is less than 5.
Wow.
It's got the same size. It's got the same flooring. It's got the same lighting. We just looked at the way we built it, the structure, the integration, and everything else differently. And so that's the difference that, and it is changing in New Zealand.
But you don't call it innovation?
Oh, it is 100% it's innovation.
You still like the word?
I don't. It is innovation. I guess I don't like putting in a line of stuff.
Yep.
We sort of explain what we do and how that's led to a fantastic outcome.
Yeah.
Because it is simply amazing how much wastage goes on in this country, in a whole lot of places. Like if you've got, it's interesting how you see that picture of that stadium in Auckland they were looking to build $1 billion. Well, that's not $1 billion, that's 3. The Brisbane one's 4.2 for the same size stadium. We've got something, you can see where that was going from a cost overrun.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I think what's happened here in town is great. They've performed, the contractor's been paid well.
Totally.
They're on a fixed price, and then you get the other one that's still being built.
Yeah. We won't talk about that. What we're like, look, I see when you have the 3-spoke wheel, like every part has ownership, right? Is that a big part of, and obviously over time you're building trust in those 3 areas. Obviously now, do you use what you've been doing? I think it was interesting to hear 60 other wineries have gone through. You're kind of building, show home's not the right word, but you're building some really good case studies for this is how, other people should be looking to do stuff. And do you find people just coming to you now going, hey, we want that?
Well, there's 2 sides to that. The first is that it's people can follow relatively easily. They can go and have a view. People can grab your building consent documents. So, the challenge is to not stand still because it's pretty easy to go get a visit through a winery, take pictures, or go to a cold store we've built, or an aquatic facility because they're the public. And so you've just got to be constantly challenging and learning and knowing that the last one would never have been perfect. So that's really important. In terms of what we've left behind, I think the aquatic facilities are probably the greatest example because during the COVID, when they had the shovel money, we got to build Hawke's Bay, which was through a trust. We got to build Kiwa, which we've spoken about, Nainai and Stratford. And all of those had some funding through the government, whether it was regional money or whether it was the shovel. Now, by the time the first project, I think it was one of the very first, if not the first project that Treasury, through Crown Infrastructure, was funding it, allowed a sole source procurement approach.
Okay.
So they chose Apollo based on the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise, not on being the cheapest.
Brilliant.
And our client, Bruce, amazing guy, he said, if you don't use Apollo, I'm walking away.
Wow.
And the thing was that project had already sort of been started to be announced, and it wouldn't look good for anyone if it hadn't gone ahead.
Yeah.
And then Gisborne, they had another architect on there, and he wouldn't work with Sir Derek on the cultural side, and they spent a whole bunch of money, and it was going nowhere, and they were panicking.
Yep.
And I remember having a call from the CEO, and she said, "This project's a failure. I'm done. I'll be gone."
Yep.
And it's a pretty high burden, but don't you love trust though? Like when someone's trusting you, you work so much harder when you've got that trust.
Yeah.
And so we went and saw them, and I think it was 12 weeks, put together a proposal, and that is the most magnificent facility. And then Nainai came along, and so that one in Gisborne, when they're having the problems, they were basically, because Crown Infrastructure can't promote a company.
Yep.
But my understanding, they said you need to talk to just have a chat to Apollo and maybe see what they could do. And then 9i was similar. So everyone's seen what we've done. There's a project in Tauranga that's sort of spinning the wheels a little bit with the new councillors because there's budget and things they've got to look at. And I believe the mayor's been to 9i, and the feedback was that the best thing you can do is bring on Apollo really early, which they have in Tauranga. And it's just such a lovely way to work.
Yeah. All
the prices are checked. They have their own QSs on their side. We've got to go through a process, but we also want to make a fair margin.
Yeah, true.
There's stuff in the industry at the moment. We've heard 0% margins, 1% margins. You can forget it. That's no one should be wanting to employ someone on those numbers, because if they go under, I can tell you that margin that you thought you were saving is now going to be a hell of a lot of bigger cost.
Yeah. And I think, look, when you're in business like that, one of the things I just wanted to write there, like I can see now the decision to build generational business, right? The business is going to be bigger than you and carry longer than you. I can see why you can see that decision now, because like you're building trust inside a leadership team. You're building trust inside designers. You're actually building capability around mindset. Obviously, yourself and Craig, your mindsets have really filtered into the company. One, don't take yourself too seriously, right? But do a good job, right? And really care. And I think that's one of the things, like that project we just mentioned in Christchurch that's not ready. Do they really care? I would question that, right? Because if they cared, it would definitely, we all know things happen and mistakes happen, but saying something the other day, it's how you react and fix that sort of stuff, right? And I can see how, I'm actually looking forward to going to Gisborne and seeing that
Kiwa.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. And that project in town, it's easy to point your finger at the contractor. I'd be more interested to look at how that was structured contractually. Where did the risk lie? Was there a fair share of risk?
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, construction companies are there to make money, as the subcontractors are. The client's there to get a good project at a fair price. And I don't know whether that was how that was structured, or whether unnecessarily risk was put on the contractor. And when you're a big, normal tendering type contractor, you have a pretty big armory of ammunition to throw back should things go bad. Whereas that's not the game we're in. I think extensions of time and all that are great trendy things in our industry. And 23 years we've had 3, and one of them was Gabrielle, which was the cyclone that hit us. We had 5 weather events when we built that Kiwa. So much for the Gisborne driest, sunniest place in New Zealand.
So true.
So the industry is learning around how to share risk, how to allocate risk, understanding what that means to ensure it's fair.
Yeah. Look, obviously, you've built a successful business, and you're building a successful business that's going to carry on. And I know now you're giving back a lot, and you have been for a while. Let's talk a wee bit about that, because I love your mindset around charity and around helping people. Did that come from the early days of maybe not having much, and seeing how people were affected by that, to really wanting to be giving back now? Because you guys definitely are, you're one of the I guess, from what I've seen, very significant in the way you're doing stuff.
Yeah, we do give a lot. It's interesting. We had our fitness brand on the stadium, Orange Theory, which didn't succeed. Good lesson of sticking to your knitting. But we decided to put Apollo's name on it because we didn't want to leave it empty for the next couple of years. So that's not our normal approach, but it was something we decided to do. We'd sort of given the commitment with Orange, we'd do it, so we decided to carry on, and we get some benefits out of that. We're certainly not. It's in the same realms of branding the new one, but look, it started out early on with Joel and Polly Parry, who were the 2 Olympians out of London, and we met them at a bank function and said, how do you get on for sponsorship? And they went, we've got a rope sponsor and a sunglass sponsor, and they're standing there with 2 gold medals, and I'm going, no, money. Joe said to me, why would someone want to give me money? And I looked at him and went, because people love being associated with success. Yeah. So we went on a journey with them. I raised a lot of money for them to help them get to Rio, which was a super cool thing. And that was probably the start of the journey of realising the impact it can have both on the business and me. And Craig wasn't involved so much in that. He's doing some other stuff. And how positive that was. But when we got to that intergenerational thing, we were at a point where, from a financial perspective, we decided we were going to start giving a reasonable chunk of money back to the community. And the difficulty was there's 1,000 good charities, right? There's 1,000 places, whether
Yeah.
it's cancer, whether it's Starship, and all that.
Yeah.
But what we wanted was something that was tangible to us, that the team that was implementing and doing the work and the clients could actually see, touch and feel sort of, the
Nice.
outcome. And we were talking to Rob Waddell about it, and he said, look, we're doing this program in schools where there's a group of people who can't afford sports.
Yep.
And, very personal to me.
Yeah.
And so we started working with Rob, and we're now at a point where we support 26 schools. They're always in the sort of lower socioeconomic areas, and that's just because we can't support every school.
Yeah.
They're generally in the areas we're in. And the reason we do it is we have 5 C's in Apollo, and one of those C's is community. And so when we operate in a community, because often we're there and we're out like Gisborne, we want to have a lasting impact more than just having built a building and supported subcontractors. And so we wanted this thing there, and the school really allowed that. We supported 3 schools in Gizzy. We've still got 4 in Hawke's Bay, 4 in Waikato, 3 in South Auckland, a couple in Dunedin, and a few others. And that was just a really good thing. So it can be anything from a team getting support.
Yep.
It's generally a scholarship based, because what we found by supporting a team, half of them didn't need it. We had a great story of a young man who both parents were in jail, and he was a bit of a badass from what I understand. Don't know his name, don't need to know his name. And he couldn't afford to get to the National Rugby League champs. So we supported him, and he got a contract out of Australia.
Wow.
So we don't know what he did with that.
No.
But this thing about intergenerational and giving opportunity was one of the most fulfilling things that I heard. We have families, like we have I think we've got 2,000 kids now we've supported, or students, over the last few years. And we get a snippet of each application without a name, because we don't, that can be very personal. They have a student council and teachers who approve it. And it's just super. And it can be, they've lost both parents to cancer, and the grandparents are bringing them up.
Yeah.
It can be all sorts of things. And the good thing is the schools generally know whether that's the case or whether they're falling. So that's one of the things we do. We also, because we build a lot of pools and so forth, we were Swimming New Zealand sponsor. We're about to finish that in July. We did it for 4 years, and it's mainly, so swimming was 2 things. It was, a lot of it was marketing, because we were actually building swimming pools. So it was nice to be associated with it. And my daughter swam for New Zealand. All my kids were swimmers. So that meant a hell of a lot. But it doesn't probably quite meet that philanthropic side to us now. So we've decided that, and it's tough on them, but you know, that's just decisions you've got to make. But then the other side, there's 2 other bits we do. One is water safety, because we build a lot of pools. So all the pools we've built, we support them around Christmas. We do about 2,000 lessons a year for water safety. And a great story on that is in Hamilton, Craig went along and he was talking to one of the teachers, and he said, how do you get them to prepare for this? Like, all these kids have never been in water.
No.
They're from Afghanistan and other places. And they said, we've got a whole lot of buckets, and we practice putting their head in the water. Not them putting, the kids putting their head.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal. This is New Zealand with, the 6th largest coastline in the world or something. And to have that ability just to give them the confidence to enjoy water. Is fantastic. And then the last one is Craig is the chair of Full Bellies, which is a charity in Christchurch that provides primary school lunches to the ones the government doesn't, which is, I don't think they're called decile anymore, but decile 5 and above. So they do about 1,200 lunches a week. Amazing cause. A lot of people got on board with that. You know, the Crusaders, EY, we send the staff. Ali, my wife, and I, we cook 110 cheese and Vegemite scrolls every Sunday and deliver that for Monday. So again, it's just, and all of these things, go back to that intergenerational, are things that affect people long term. They're not just, okay, I'll fix something now. It is, we hope that what we're doing, and the student sport thing's amazing. So the academic outcomes of those kids, because they've done some work on this, is infinitely more because they feel part of a team. They feel part of their community by being able to be at school and being in those teams. And the average was between 4 and 5 out of 5 is how much more you go to school because you're now playing sport.
Yeah, totally.
Phenomenal.
Yep. And also the fact that someone cares about them. You know, someone's actually caring to do something for them, which before they've never ever had. I always remember watching a TV program. It's never left me. And there was this group of young kids brought in, and they were obviously, you know, they had had trouble, behavior issues, and all this sort of stuff. and they were trained by some people, and they were given skills, and they were given shown how to drive forklifts, and they were shown how to do a whole bunch of things. And then they're with them for a whole week, and you could see the camaraderie, the trust that went from not having any trust to all of a sudden trusting. And they did a whole bunch of things. They played sport with them and all
Mm.
this sort of stuff. At the end of that week, the two people turned back up in their police uniforms,
Oh, wow.
and it was unbelievable to see the kids and how they reacted when they saw the two people in their police uniforms, and how all of a sudden their paradigm had been broken of what the
Hmm.
police was, because the police to
Yeah, that's
them
powerful,
were
isn't it?
told that they, the police were shit, the police were that, the police were out to
Mm.
get you, the police were all this sort of things. And all of a sudden these kids were angry for probably, you could see they were angry for about 10 minutes, and then they let it go because they realized
Mm.
that these people, maybe what they've been told
Mm.
all their lives, that was actually not
That's
true.
pretty powerful, isn't
And
it?
it's never forgot me, because one of the things they realized too was obviously putting kids into sport. Once again, feeding them.
Mhm.
All the things that we probably take for granted as
Oh, we
as
do.
in New Zealand, and well, some people in New Zealand take for granted, right? And it just made me. And one of the other things that struck me is how kids learn. Like I wasn't the best person to understand algebra and biology and all that sort of stuff. I got a okay in English, um, but I realized I learned more by doing, and it was the same with these kids. No one had shown them how to drive a forklift before.
Mm.
Drive a forklift, they were really good at it.
Mm.
Like they learned by doing stuff, and I thought, man, the education system could learn a lot
Yeah.
from this type of stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I went and visited Fraser High, met the basketball team that we'd supported, a bunch of them, and they got me in the middle, and they said stand there, and they all got around me and did a haka to me.
Wow.
That was after receiving my tonga, and so it's those sort of things that you really get to appreciate how much it meant to them. And they what was the most special about that was they asked me my why,
Nice.
and I was able to tell them. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't just, oh yeah, well, I got money, here you go.
Yeah.
So that I think changed their views as well of the reason for the support, which was super cool. We try and catch up with each region of schools, and they come and talk to us, and we have a bit of an event and so forth. So we've done that and met a few of them, which has been cool. But and we try and get along to the events.
Yeah.
We try and encourage. And Rob's team's amazing. So he, through his sport thing, he ended up our Apollo logos on every secondary school national competition, even though we're not necessarily sponsoring that.
Very good.
The people there are often
Yeah.
part of it.